Shalom Israel. First and foremost, I want to say all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh Ba'Hashem Yahushai. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone. Salutations to you brothers throughout the four corners of the earth, teaching the truth in righteousness and sincerity. To you Israelite foreigners, come back home to the truth. To those that passed away serving the Lord, the dead in Yahushua shall arise first. All right, I want to do this video to further go into the importance of proving that you so-called Hispanics and Native Americans are part of the 12 tribes of Israel, as well as the so-called Negroes. You know, the so-called white man, he always suppresses history. You know, the so-called white man, any history that doesn't benefit him, clearly he doesn't want to deal with. You know what I'm saying? He doesn't want to acknowledge. You know, he wants to make everybody look to him for guidance and to be able to say, hey, to be able to say, hey, we're the great people of the earth. You know, and that's not the case. You know, now, another part of the problem with dealing with the topic of so-called Hispanics being part of the heritage of the children of Israel is that the history is also being suppressed by a lot of so-called black people. See, when you're either dark brown or you know, as light as medium brown, you know, you make it's easier for you to relate to the term black because color-wise you're closer there to that than a lot of other people. You know what I'm saying? But if you factor in, if you take out the white man, Johann Blumenberg, I believe his name was, who coined the term black people or white people, and you take the color out of it and you just take nationality and you take cultural similarities, right? You know, because I'm going to talk to you on a scholarly level. You know, you take the cultural similarities between the so-called Negroes in America, the West Indians, and the so-called Hispanics and Native Americans, you know, that links us closer as a people than the way we fucking look. You know what I'm saying? And on top of that, the way we look isn't so fucking different. You know what I'm saying? You know, you got a lot of so-called black people, you know, famous black people that they've pulled up pictures and did side by sides and like, hey, Kobe Bryant looks like a Native American. I don't know. They came up with a whole bunch of them. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not going to sit here and try to remember them because I got a bad memory anyway. But you get the point. Is, you know, part of the problem is the fact that the so-called Hispanics and Native Americans are considered to be not considered to be Israelites. Those of you that saw camp this last week, this motherfucker picked me out of the whole crowd and said, you know, he's not an Israelite though, you know, and he's trying to cleave on and all that shit, you know what I'm saying? And brothers was pissed off about that shit, you know, but that's what it is. You got a lot of so-called Negroes out there that are brainwashed into thinking anybody that does not look like a so-called Negro isn't part of God's chosen people, you know. So they never left that African mind frame alone. You know, you have to factor in that, you know, a few things in the Bible. For example, you know what I'm saying, there's a reason why, there's a possible reason why David was called Ruddy. Now, you know, his son was a so-called black man. He you know, he had nappy hair. And if you don't want to believe that I Am Black but Comely is him speaking of himself, then fine. But you still can't get around certain history. You know what I'm saying? Now, where that becomes important is his father said, you know, he was described as being ruddy. You know what I'm saying? In some cases, people say, oh, ruddy means red. You know what I'm saying? You got so-called Negroes that have a reddish tint, you know? Now, the reason why this is also important to break down is because you got motherfuckers that's going to say, hey, wait a minute. If David was described as red and Esau is described as red, how come David's not the so-called white man? And this is clear information here. When you look at the scriptures, being red, you know, red-skinned is not the only determining factor that we use to find out that the so-called white man is Esau. You know what I mean? You have to take on the whole knowledge, not just a little bit of it. Not just the parts that you want to twist and turn and say, hey, you see this, you see that? You know what I'm saying? So with no further ado, you know, I've been rambling for 5 minutes, but I got this book. You know, I forgot what made me buy it, but it says Mysteries of the Ancient Americas. And it says the New World before Columbus. So this is called the New World, but it's new to who? It was new to the so-called white man. There were civilizations flourishing here. Let's see, a good probably about a good 1,700 years before Columbus came, there were civilizations here. About, you know. So to begin with, you know, I'm going to read the intro to the book. Now, before I start, all the books that I showcase or do a book report on, I'm not reading everything. There's a lot of shit that I gloss over that might be a good point, but it's not important enough for me to, you know, read in the sit down. So those of you that get these books, there's more information than what I put out there. You know, like I said, I'm just kind of pulling out the more important points. You know what I'm saying? Because otherwise, these sit downs will be 2-3 hours long, and some of the points really aren't that major. You know what I'm saying? So to begin with, in the introduction, about the 4th paragraph, it says, Voyagers of a Legend. The first of 7 major sections presents the confusing evidence and lingering doubts about pre-Columbian visitors. Egyptians, Phoenicians, Israelites, Welsh, Irish, Japanese, Chinese, and finally the Vikings, who we know arrived 500 years before Columbus. So one thing that we have to get out of our mind is this fucking Columbus Day shit. All right, we got to stop celebrating Columbus Day as black, Hispanic, and Native American people. This motherfucker was the enemy. You don't celebrate the enemy calling himself discovering a land that there were people on already. From the rip, by calling him a discoverer and shit, that's a false holiday. You know what I'm saying? You go into it, the Egyptians that they're talking about was really Israelites that carried over Egyptian customs. It wasn't actual Egyptians. All right? So what? Something came up on my phone. The Phoenicians, we know the Phoenicians was Israelites. The Israelites, it says Israelites. The Welsh were Israelites. Light-skinned Israelites, actually, as we're going to read later on in the book. The Irish, those was Israelites. You know what I'm saying? The Japanese and Chinese, those was likely Israelite foreigners, you know. And the Vikings, you know, those was definitely Israelites. Likely, I would say they were of the tribe of Dan, you know, just like the Welsh. I'm not saying that I know who the hell they are here in America. I'm just saying this is likely what was the case throughout history. All right. Now, I'm going to start off. Well, I already started, but I'm going to read a passage which everyone should by now be aware or understand or you know about this passage. 2nd Ezra chapter 13 verse 10. 40. It says, those are the 10 tribes. All right, the 10 tribes. You know, you look at our sign. You got the 4. You got Ephraim, Manasseh, Issachar, Naphtali, Asher, Zebulun, Dan, Reuben, Gad, and Simeon. All right. So you have the 10 tribes. It says those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoner out of their own land in the time of Hosea the king, whom Salmanassar the king of Assyria led away captive. This happened after 722 BC. To give you an idea when this took place. All right. It says, and he carried them over the waters, and so came they into another land. But they took this counsel among themselves that they would leave the multitude of the heathen. So the Assyrians were considered heathen. The other nations were heathens. It says, and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt. So mankind never actually settled in the so-called Americas. All right, they've been there. They've been taking trips over there, but they never settled there to live, to make a life there. You know, although, you know, this book does kind of go into saying the Olmecs did it, you know, but, you know, clearly a lot of people did come to this land, but nobody on record has settled here. All right. it says that they might there keep their statutes which they never kept in their own land. So their intention on coming here was to leave the heathens with their wicked ways and come here and serve the Lord. It didn't work out that way, but that was the intention. It says, and they entered into Euphrates by the narrow places of the river, for the Most High then showed signs for them and held still the flood till they were passed over. So the Lord stopped us from being, from drowning, because that's a long ass boat trip, and as we're going to go into in this book, it's not an easy boat trip. A lot of nations didn't have the power, their ships weren't strong enough, and you're talking about people in power, let alone those of us that were in the captivity, taking a trip to the Americas. That was almost unheard of. You know what I mean? That was insane. So it says, for through that country there was a great way to go, namely of 1.5 years, and the same region is called Arsareth, which means faraway land. All right, now usually brothers stop there, but you can go on because the scripture gets more, says more stuff. It says, then dwelt they there until the latter time, which is now. So those Israelites that came to the Western Hemisphere, they stayed here, most of them. As a nation, we stayed here until the latter time. This is the latter time now. And now, when they shall begin to come, the highest shall stay the springs of the stream again. This time he's talking about the winds of destruction that they talk about in Revelation 7. It says, that they may go through, therefore thou sawest thou the multitude with peace. But those that be left behind of thy people are they that are found within my borders. Now when he destroyeth the multitude of the nations that are gathered together, he shall defend his people that remain. So this also goes into Amos, the 9th chapter. It said, and he shall show them great wonders. All right, so I just wanted to go into that, because now I'm about to read out of this book. All right, it says, let's see. The concept of, this is page 10, Visitors from Lands Beyond. It says, the concept of a populated new world created a problem for the faithful, because people thought that, by the way, it took me 3 days to read this book. I read it at work mostly, 300 pages. All right. When the so-called white man stumbled across the Native Americans, you have to understand something. You have what's called laymen, and then you have men that are high up in society. The average person didn't know shit. The main people, the people in power and shit, those were the ones that knew that there was Native Americans here, or there was people here. Likely knew who the fuck they was. That's why they brought Hebrew interpreters with them. But for the most part, the average person didn't know shit about Native, so-called Native Americans here. So the people that heard about it, that there were Native Americans here, fuck with their faith, because they're like, wait a minute, where did these people come from? Japhet, Ham, or Shem? Because to their knowledge, everything was over there. And they had a clear-cut idea who was Japhet, Shem, or Ham. So it says, the Old Testament story of the creation credited the descendants of the 3 sons of Noah with peopling Asia, Africa, and the Aegean coastline, which is Europe, but left the origins of the inhabitants of the Americas unaccounted for. Check this out. A dual creation of the second garden of Eden in the newfound continents was heresy. They didn't buy that shit. So it said, thus the Indians, so-called, could only have come to the new world from the old. So they knew that they came from the old world. So I'm about to cut the tape, because I can only do 15-minute videos, but we're going to proceed.